The young woman in this Washington townhouse. Inevitably, a photograph of the man leaving in the early morning found its way into Hoover's growing file on Senator John F. Kennedy. The day after he was elected president, John Kennedy reappointed J. Edgar Hoover as director of the FBI. Hoover's immediate boss would be Robert Kennedy, an attorney general determined to crack down on organized crime.
When Robert Kennedy became the Attorney General of the United States, we had an intensified investigation of organized crime.
The FBI agents who were interested in organized crime have been working very hard, thought they had died and went to heaven when Robert Kennedy became the Attorney General.
Hoover wanted no part in Robert Kennedy's war on organized crime. The FBI director fought back with the weapon he knew best.
Hoover was such a power at that time that he would actually send memos to the Attorney General and saying, I thought you'd be interested knowing that your brother, the president, had such and such a girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
One such girlfriend was Judith Exner, then Judith Campbell.
The relationship that I had with Jack from early 1960, Hoover knew all about that, and he used that as leverage.
FBI wiretaps had revealed that when Judith Campbell wanted to contact John Kennedy, she placed her calls to his devoted secretary, Evelyn Lincoln.
Well, in this one instance, he sent a memorandum on March the 20th, 1962, saying that there was a young lady that had made 90 calls to the White House, to Evelyn Lincoln. And did you know that she is connected with the mafia? And he would have an appointment.
Ironically, the wiretaps that Robert Kennedy had forced Hoover to place on mafiosi like Sam Giancana's henchman, Johnny Roselli, revealed that both men knew Judith Campbell.
So they arranged a luncheon day, March 22nd, 1962, at which time they discussed the telephone calls.
And during that meeting, he let him know, face to face, that he knew about Jack's relationship with me. Right after the meeting, Jack called me. He was furious because in his eyes he felt that he just couldn't believe that Hoover would have the audacity to do this face to face and, in a sense, try to threaten him.
Hoover's files may have helped him keep his job, but nothing could stop Bobby Kennedy's war on the mafia, and by now, even Hoover had been forced to do something about it. In Miami Beach, FBI agents listened in as one of Meyer Lansky's associates lamented Hoover's loss of influence.
The gentleman was talking to Jesse Weiss, owner of Joe's Stone Crabs on Miami Beach, a place where Hoover patronized very often, and of course never paid for what he ate. Said that Hoover had personally told him this, that Bobby Kennedy had taken over the FBI and was forcing it to do things that Hoover didn't want it to do. And these gentlemen deplored the fact that the FBI was being forced to investigate them, to harass them. And they declared that Hoover is a lost cause. And they were all very unhappy because their buddy had lost the power. And of course, obviously, he would not have had to regain power had not John Kennedy been killed a few weeks later.
The minute the bullet hit the back of Jack Kennedy's head, and Jack Kennedy was no longer president, and Bobby Kennedy was rendered impotent as Attorney General as far as Hoover was concerned, I believe Hoover took control back of his organized crime program, and it stopped.
The day after John F. Kennedy was killed, Hoover and Tolson went to Pimlico to spend a day at the races.
And they're off. 7 3-year-olds.
Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover, over many years, had an unusually close personal and professional relationship. And it all had to do with Hoover's power and Johnson's power.
It was no surprise that President Johnson reappointed Hoover. What has not been known is the part Hoover may have played in Johnson becoming president at all. This part of Hoover's secret history goes back to the 1960 Democratic Convention, when Kennedy and Johnson were both seeking the nomination. Kennedy joked that Johnson should remain a senator.
So I come to you today full of admiration for Senator Johnson, full of affection for him, strongly in support of him for Majority Leader, and I'm confident that in that position we're all going to be able to work together. Thank you.
Behind the smiles, it was an intense fight. But Johnson enjoyed the secret support of J. Edgar Hoover and his files.
Lyndon Johnson told me that J. Edgar Hoover loathed and despised both Bobby Kennedy and President Kennedy, and that J. Edgar Hoover had extensive files on President Kennedy's womanizing.
When Kennedy won the nomination, he surprised almost everyone by asking Johnson to be vice president. Until now, history has recorded that Kennedy only made the offer as a goodwill gesture and was shocked when Johnson accepted. The Johnson nomination has always been a mystery because the Kennedy brothers made the decision in secret and vowed never to tell what happened. But one other person did hear parts of their private conversation at the Biltmore Hotel, Evelyn Lincoln.
And when I came in there, they were huddled together closely on the bed discussing this tremendous issue about Lyndon B. Johnson being on the ticket. Bobby would get up and go look out the window and stare. Kennedy would sit there and think. It was intense. In fact, they hardly knew I came into the room. They were so engrossed in their conversation. That went on for 30 minutes, trying to figure out how they could maneuver to get it so he wouldn't be on the ticket.
Evelyn Lincoln says that what she heard that day convinced her the Kennedys were being blackmailed.
One of the factors that made John F. Kennedy choose Lyndon B. Johnson for vice president were the malicious rumors that were fed to Lyndon B. Johnson by J. Edgar Hoover about his womanizing. And so that's one of the reasons that pushed him to go down and offer him the vice presidency. Lyndon B. Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover had boxed them into a hole. They were absolutely boxed in.
And so history was made. Lyndon Johnson ran on the Democratic ticket and eventually became the 36th President of the United States. The Kennedys may have kept their secret, but more than 30 years later, the one surviving eyewitness has broken her silence.
Robert Kennedy said, "We both promised each other that we'd never tell what happened that day."
But I am telling what happened.
Hoover would remain director of the FBI for the rest of his life.
J. Edgar Hoover celebrates his 40th year as head of the FBI, and there's a simple ceremony in his office to mark the occasion.
Though Presidents Johnson and Nixon both wanted to remove him, neither dared.
The FBI chief will reach retirement age this year, but President Johnson has signed a bill permitting him to stay on.
And only after Hoover died would the first great blows be struck against the mafia.
For Mr. Hoover.
And what we saw here was a powerful public officer in charge of America's most important law enforcement agency, the FBI, who had cut himself away from any accountability to the law.
I think it would be a very healthy thing for this nation to strike Hoover's name from the FBI building, because Hoover's greatest public service in